Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Grayzone. Max Blumenthal here with award-winning Canadian journalist Aaron Mate. It's been a minute. Thanks for waiting. We're always fashionably late. At some point in the next few seconds, we'll be live on Rockfin as well. And we're live on X, the website formerly known as Twitter. Let me get us up on the Grayzone, the Grayzone's X site, just so everyone knows where to find us. Since we're streaming from my site. Aaron, how you doing?
How's it going, everybody? How's it going, Max? Thanks to everybody who's here watching live with us. And if you like the stream, please like it so that more people will see it. That helps us beat all the forces of algorithmic suppression that are coming our way. And thanks for joining us. We have a lot to discuss today. We're going to get into Israel's claims about Al-Shifa Hospital and now its targeting of more hospitals. The claims of a Hamas command center, which have quickly been forgotten because that turns out to be yet another Israeli lie. We're going to talk about Joe Biden and his open embrace of this genocidal assault on Gaza, what that's doing for his domestic political fortunes. And it looks like, as everyone's been predicting, he's taking a huge hit according to the most recent polls, and a lot more.
Yeah. A lot more. I mean, remember Ukraine? It's just totally faded.
Totally faded.
And it's a sad situation there. For those who are wondering why we didn't have a live stream last week, I was actually in the region and I have nothing to report from there. I had gone on an ill-fated mission or delegation to try to reach the Egyptian side of the Rafah border, to see the aid situation up close and to raise attention about the lack of aid going into Gaza. And our permission was denied by the Egyptian government, which maybe should have been predictable. There's really nothing you can do in Egypt, activism-wise, whether you're an Egyptian or an international, and our presence was not wanted. And to make a long story short, I did not feel like my presence was very welcome in that country. And once that became clear to me, I left as soon as possible. And it's also abundantly clear that the Rafah crossing is controlled by Israel, and that the U.S. has done whatever it can to ensure Israeli control over the Rafah border. So when you hear the State Department saying, well, this is really up to our Egyptian counterparts to let aid trucks in, that's just simply not true. And the Egyptian government, while it is hostile to Hamas, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his military junta, are no friends of Hamas. The last thing they want is for a humanitarian crisis to spill over into the Egyptian Sinai desert. That would be a disaster for them. They do not want one Palestinian coming in. So they want to stabilize the situation inside Gaza. They want a ceasefire as much as they hate Hamas. They want to end the humanitarian crisis. So they want aid trucks to go in, and they do not have any control. It all starts with the Camp David Agreement, signed in 79, agreed in 77, and it all flows from there. Egypt does not have control over the Rafah crossing. And so anyone who wants to go in as part of a human caravan and try to, make hay about this, don't even try. It's not going to happen. And that's tragic. If you go to Cairo, there are going to be at least 5 checkpoints you have to get through to get to Rafah. And at each checkpoint, if you don't have permission from the government, you will be turned back or something else could happen. So anyway, I'm back here after a few days of gathering nothing. And well, we'll hear from our contributor, Jeremy Lafredo, soon, who's heading back from the West Bank and Jerusalem. West Bank has had 17 Palestinian villages fully ethnically cleansed. East Jerusalem and the West Bank are under a hardcore military dictatorship where people are being arrested and interrogated and publicly humiliated simply for social media posts. So he's going to have a lot to say when he returns. We're looking forward to that. But as Aaron said, today we're going to cover Israel's war on hospitals, the continuing revelations of October 7th, and the domestic political fallout for Biden and company. I would urge everyone watching right now to go to our YouTube channel. We just published an exclusive mini documentary that about Israel's war on hospitals that contains footage from inside Shifa Hospital, which has been taken over by the Israeli military, raided, and is being emptied. Many patients have been killed or kidnapped. And we have exclusive footage from a Gaza-based journalist, Mohammed Al-Saif, showing the hospital's last days. So I think this is a significant piece. And I'll be putting it out on the website formerly known as Twitter soon, but check it out at our YouTube channel. And, we'll talk about that. But Aaron, Haaretz called us conspiracy theorists for what we said about October 7th. And now, as usual, it turns out we might have been onto something.
Yes. So you've done reporting at the Grayzone, and others have done this as well at Mondo Weiss and at the Electronic Intifada, based on Israeli sources, that people on October 7th who were said to have been killed by Hamas or other Palestinian militants were in fact killed by friendly fire, by Israeli forces firing indiscriminately at some of the areas that were targeted on October 7th. And for that, you were called conspiracy theorists, including by Haaretz. But now an official Israeli police investigation in Israel has confirmed exactly what you reported, which is that an Israeli helicopter did hit Israeli citizens on October 7th.
Yeah. In my piece at the Grayzone, I pointed to testimony by helicopter pilots, and I'll show you some of the footage that I linked to. This was published the day after October 7th by the Israeli military. And you can see them targeting, that was like a tuk-tuk, a rickshaw going back into Gaza. They're targeting cars that are going from the area that the Nova Electronic Music Festival took place, and Kibbutz Be'eri and Kibbutz Re'im, which also have military bases in them. They're shooting people on foot. And I pointed to testimony in my report at the Grayzone of Israeli helicopter pilots speaking anonymously to Hebrew language media, describing how they had no intelligence of what was taking place on the ground. They had no idea who was Israeli, who was Palestinian. They were just basically told to empty the tank of their cannons and their Hellfire missiles and to destroy as many vehicles and people on the ground as possible. We have no idea if that, look at this target right here. We have no idea if they were Israeli or Palestinian. And who are these people? They don't know in the helicopters. I quoted a helicopter pilot telling Israeli media that he actually fired on a home in Kibbutz Be'eri that had captives inside. He said he actually didn't know if he hit the home or not. He was trying to warn the captives inside. Well, there they just blew up a car and fired and killed everyone inside. I mean, this is horrible footage. And now we know, based on an Israeli police investigation, that this helicopter killed Israeli citizens, Israeli non-combatants. We know that. But here's what Haaretz had to say about us for reporting this. They called us liars, of course, just because it didn't support their narrative. Denial of Hamas's October 7th massacre is gaining pace online. Denial of Hamas's atrocities is gaining traction online as more and more people play down the terror group's responsibility for its brutal murders, rapes, and destruction. Okay, nobody, not me, anyone else, Electronic Intifada, Mondo Weiss, who reported on this, denied that October 7th happened, or that it was like some kind of inside job, or that Hamas militants killed people on October 7th. We didn't deny that. There's literally no evidence that sexual assault and rape took place. They have yet to produce any evidence. It's just something that they're just putting forward now. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has appropriated the Me Too movement's "Believe All Women" phrase to try to push this idea and impose the idea in the minds of Westerners that mass rape was committed. But beyond that, what they're so upset about in this Haaretz piece.
But look at this headline quickly, Max, just on the issue of rape. Amid war and urgent need to ID bodies, evidence of Hamas's October 7th rapes slips away. And so this is the Times of Israel reporting that they collected no physical evidence of rape from the bodies. Now, does that mean it's impossible that rape happened? I mean, anything is possible. It's who knows? But there's no evidence of it so far. There's witness testimony, but we know that in all these cases where you're trying to manufacture consent for committing atrocities against Gaza, it's quite possible that some of these witness testimonies were invented to basically justify that. And suspicion of that is amplified by the fact that you have no physical evidence of rape. If you have no physical evidence of rape, then the burden of proof is on Israel to prove its claims of rape. And so far they haven't. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, and based on all the other lies they've told about 40 beheaded babies, a baby baked in an oven, we have to doubt the most extreme claims. And so the helicopter pilots were clearly killing people who are Palestinian and Israeli in this bid to prevent captives from being taken into Gaza. The initial number given of those killed at the Nova Electronic Music Festival was 260. Now the Israeli police are saying 360 were killed. How should we account for that discrepancy? We could potentially deduce that 100 that was added to this figure were people who were killed on their way into Gaza, on the road into the Gaza Strip, who were not seen as part of the Electronic Music Festival and were therefore, how were they killed there? They were killed by helicopters. That's something legitimate to deduce, in my opinion. And then you have all these scenes of burned cars that were that often contained charred bodies that were photographed afterwards. And those photographs were then placed into the presentation by the Israeli Foreign Ministry and Israeli military to foreign journalists to propagandize them Clockwork Orange style into supporting, as you said, Aaron, Israel's genocidal assault on the Gaza Strip. This is Hamas's savagery. Look, they burned all these people alive. Look at this. But that's not what happened. Take a look, compare those photos of charred bodies inside melted cars to the photos of the highway of death of Saddam Hussein's Iraqi army in 1991 that was torched by the US Air Force on its way out of Kuwait. And they're almost identical, using the same kind of weapons from Apache helicopters, Hellfire missiles, and so on. So many of these photos also show Hamas militants who were killed by Israel. Many of the photos that are being put forward in these glitzy October 7th atrocity exhibitions. There was one in Hollywood that Gal Gadot, the Israeli actress, fronted. And now Mark Regev, we have Mark Regev. I think this is in an interview with Mehdi Hassan. I don't have the video in front of me. Maybe you can pull it up. But Mark Regev, the Israeli government spokesman for Netanyahu, has acknowledged that 1,400 Israelis were not killed on October 7th. The number is closer to 1,200. And the 200 that were added were actually Palestinians from Gaza who were killed. and then just chalked up as Israelis. And I pointed that out at my piece at the Grayzone, that many of the photos of charred bodies and cars actually could have been Palestinians, militants, and others who flowed in from Gaza.
Well, you're right, because at least in some of the cases of the bodies, I can't speak for everyone, but certainly in some of the cases, that's exactly what happened, because that's what Mark Regev, the Israeli spokesperson, admits to.
We had the number at 1,400 casualties, and now we've revised that down to 1,200 because we understood that we had overestimated. We made a mistake. There were actually bodies that were so badly burnt, we thought they were ours. In the end, apparently, they were Hamas terrorists.
So there you go. That's the admission right there. That's exactly what you predicted, and now he's admitting it. By the way, where's his accent from? He's South African originally?
Yeah.
Like the symbolism of the Israeli spokesperson being a settler from South Africa. So he's a settler to begin with and happens to come from another apartheid state, South Africa.
Well, I mean, all the spokespeople are, white Europeans or South Africans. But anyway, Aaron, if we talk about decolonization, we will be banned from X by Elon Musk after he made an anti-Semitic comment and then got, the race hustlers from the Anti-Defamation League basically said, cave to us or we will come for you. And he said, okay.
Yes. We can only say from the river to the sea if we're quoting the Likud party charter. It says that Israel will have Jewish sovereignty from the river to the sea, but we can't say river to the sea if we're calling for freedom in all of Palestine. No, it's a no-go. Yeah.
So here's an Israeli Air Force colonel who's acknowledging that Israel carried out a mass Hannibal operation on October 7th. The Hannibal directive is once secret Israeli military doctrine of killing the captors and the Israeli captives in order to prevent a politically devastating exchange of captives like the kind we saw in 2011 for Gilad Shalit, where over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners were released in exchange for one Israeli soldier. So he's saying the gunship, the helicopter arrives at the area of activity to communicate with the division headquarters, and at 6:30 a.m. they got the order. If it can't communicate with the division's command center, it establishes communication with the brigade. But the Golani brigade wasn't available anymore because they'd all been wasted. So helicopter pilots were communicating on mobile phones, and they coordinated with different patrol groups on the ground and fire management and support. Basically, no intelligence.
משם הגיעו כנראה גם השמועות שהצבא הפציץ כל מיני
בתים
בתוך היישובים, גם נוהל קניבל, כל מיני תיאוריות קונספירציה שרצו בימים הראשונים.
So wait, so that was a Haaretz correspondent saying, okay, so, this is all a conspiracy theory that you actually targeted Israelis.
Max, I would turn down the volume all the way on the clip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
most
like all the way. Yeah.
You're in charge. All right. Colonel Erez then responds, they didn't bomb houses without permission. I myself, by the way, saw drones above every settlement as a computer image. We can watch from the command centers. So there's a big problem to deploy drones above your own territory if you don't know who the enemy is and who the settlement's patrol unit is and who our soldiers are. So he's basically saying we can't identify them from the air, nor can we identify them with the FLIR system on the helicopter gunship or the system on the drones. It's impossible to distinguish. What he's saying is it's impossible to distinguish between Israeli non-combatants, Israeli soldiers, and Hamas militants on the ground. So if you don't have someone to talk to and he tells you, I'm in this house and everyone is on the other side, everyone on the other side is an enemy, it's hard to hit and shoot. It's hard to select your targets. This is a rough translation. And so the Hannibal directive, when people speak about it, is about stopping a hostage scenario with a single vehicle. It was guided by past events in Lebanon over 3 decades ago. He's talking about the Jibril exchange for Ahmed Jibril and like 3,000 Israeli soldier, 3,000 Lebanese and Palestinian captives were released in exchange for 2 Israeli soldiers. Even there's no clear authority for the helicopter, drone, gunship, or the drone operator to open fire on the vehicle, acting carelessly of the safety of the hostage. There's no directive that formally specifies that. This is the Israeli colonel speaking. And did it happen this time? The Haaretz reporter asks, was the Hannibal directive deployed? He says, we don't know whether hostages were hit once the helicopters and drones started to fire at the fence, once they saw the mass traffic through the fence that was coming in and going out. But the Hannibal directive is intentional. If it was deployed, it was an intentional act. If hostages were hit, it was intentional. The Hannibal directive, according to Colonel Erez, was probably deployed because once you detect a hostage situation, this is Hannibal. And the Hannibal we've been drilling in the past 20 years was related to a vehicle. At what point in the fence it comes in, on what side of the road it would move, and even on which road. So they prepared for this scenario. What we saw here was a mass Hannibal. There were many openings in the fence, thousands of people on many different vehicles with hostages and without. So there you have it from an Israeli Air Force colonel, mass Hannibal, the mass targeting of Israeli non-combatants to prevent the scenario in which they'll become captives. So much for the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Now it's an anti-Semitic conspiracy fact, Haaretz.
Yeah, and you combine that with the Israeli police investigation. They didn't tell us how many Israelis were hit by Israeli helicopters, but if a helicopter is firing indiscriminately, that's pretty lethal. And what's funny, I saw some people after you posted about this on Twitter were saying, they said in response to you, they said, well, the investigation confirms that some Israelis were hit by the helicopters, but they don't say if they were killed. Like, really?
Right.
If a helicopter is firing rounds at you, like the odds of you surviving that, I think, are probably pretty low. And we saw what happened with those people who were incinerated in their cars, because that's what helicopters do. So I think it's pretty fair to assume that these Israeli helicopters killed their own people.
Well, it was friendly fire, Aaron. So they were just sending love to people. They may have hit them, but they hit them with candy and the Israeli snack known as bamba. That's what we can deduce. I mean, no, actually, there are many testimonies still coming out about the Israel, like providing cold, hard details by eyewitnesses of the Israeli military killing Israelis. One of them is from Yasmin Porat, who's just been talking ever since she was taken captive in Kibbutz Be'eri. She's one of the few survivors. She survived because a 50-year-old Hamas militant who is the commander of his platoon decided to surrender. Along with her, he used her as a human shield to surrender to the Israeli military. And she saw them then kill everyone behind her, including all the Israeli captives. And she said that 2 tank shells were fired into the home that she'd been in. And there was a child crying, and that child then went silent. And that child is now being, we'll have more on this later, but that child is now being used as part of Israel's atrocity exhibition to point to Hamas savagery. It was killed by a tank, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we have to talk about this. We have to explain exactly what happened on October 7th, because Israel is determined to use it as the justification for its genocide in Gaza. And Gideon Levy, who is known as one of the critical columnists within Israeli mainstream media, he's one of the few critical voices of the Israeli military, someone I've known for years. He's a Haaretz columnist. has published a piece attacking his friend Roger Waters for highlighting our investigation at the Grayzone in his interview with Glenn Greenwald to raise questions about October 7th. I'll pull that up right now. And it's sort of absurd, because basically what Gideon is saying is that you shouldn't ask questions about October 7th. It was the worst atrocity ever. And he's saying at the same time, Israel's committing atrocities in Gaza that are horrible, that he opposes, but we shouldn't raise questions about October 7th. Well, the whole point of raising questions about October 7th is to, first of all, just explain what the facts are and how Israel's lying, but also it undermines the case that Israel's putting forward for committing genocide in Gaza. You have to raise questions about it. I don't have I'm not going through the subscription wall, but we're not going to be intimidated into shutting up about this as though we're just like anti-Semitic conspiracists. No, Israel has lied from start to finish. They've lied from October 7th to the present. They're now lying about hospitals in order to allow them to commit one of the worst atrocities that we've ever seen in our lives. They are trying to, right now, they're bombing the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza after putting Al-Shifa Hospital out of service, the largest hospital. And this is all based on lies. So we have to call out the lies.
Yeah. And I just want to...
Gideon Levy should be ashamed of himself for trying to silence the one global celebrity who's actually calling out the basis for genocide, who's undermining the basis for genocide. And it looks like he's doing it just to make himself more palatable to Israelis because he lives there, and every leftist is afraid right now. So he's hippie punching. It's pathetic.
Right. Well, and that often happens with Grayzone stories, is when we don't accept these allegations, or the whole story, at least in this case, about allegations that are made to justify atrocities, you get accused of being a conspiracy theorist. But in this case, from what I understand of what Roger said, he's not denying that Palestinian militants committed atrocities on October 7th. He's also just raising the question based on the reporting that you've done and others have done, and that comes from Israeli sources, that at least some of these Israeli victims were killed by Israeli forces. And that's not denying that Palestinian militants carried out atrocities. It's just saying that some of these killings that were blamed on Hamas and others came from Israel. And if Gideon Levy can't understand that distinction, he shouldn't be in journalism. He should be in, I don't know, government propaganda. And I'm surprised that comes from him, because I'm a fan of what he does, and I admire the stances he's taken. He's been very brave before, but he doesn't help his position by throwing people who are continuing on in the tradition of skeptical journalism under the bus.
Yeah, and what he's saying to stop denying the atrocities, but what he really means is stop questioning the official story.
Yeah,
the official story is so out of proportion to what happened now.
Yeah,
it's so obvious that they're trying to cast October 7th in the shadow of the Holocaust and deny all context surrounding it in order to give them full latitude to cross every possible humanitarian and legal red line that I don't know what Gideon Levy's doing there. It's pathetic.
People get emotional. People get emotional in times like this, and then they let their emotions take over, and they lose their sense of rationality and what journalism is supposed to be about, which is following the facts. Like,
yeah,
if the facts are incorrect that Roger Waters is claiming, he can point that out. I haven't read this article, so I haven't seen what he says, but again, the facts, as far as I've seen them, are irrefutable, and now they're confirmed by an Israeli police investigations. I don't know what more Gideon Levy wants. Like, it's just a fact that Israeli forces did kill their own people on October 7th. That doesn't mean that they're responsible for all the killings that happened. No one's saying that, but they did kill some of their own people. That's just a fact. And I hope he apologizes to Roger for.
And it has implications for whether, yes, I hope he apologizes. I doubt he will, but it has implications for whether the captives will be released in the Gaza Strip as well. If they conducted a mass Hannibal to prevent them from being taken, there's very little reason to believe that they actually want them to be returned safe, and that they'd rather carry out a blood-spattered genocidal revenge operation to satiate the fury of the Israeli public. And it's already clearly playing out that way. So I think it's another reason to continue to examine the events of October 7th in a clear-headed and critical way.
Yeah, and it's already been reported that there was an agreement around 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit less, to release up to 50 captives by Hamas, women and children, hostages in Gaza. And Netanyahu walked away from it because Hamas wanted a 5-day pause in Israel's attacks, and Netanyahu wasn't willing to give them that. Now, apparently, it looks like he is reconsidering that under U.S. pressure after I don't know how many thousands of people he's killed since. But that was a deal Netanyahu could have gotten about 2 weeks ago, which was brokered by Qatar. It was in the New York Times. It got widely ignored, but that happened. And now it looks like that same deal is being revived. But even that is not confirmed yet, because Netanyahu's driving goal is not to rescue the hostages, the captives. It's to ethnically cleanse and kill as many Palestinians as he can. That's obvious from what he does every single second.
Well, and it's also he's being pushed by the so-called security chiefs. I mean, I don't think that Netanyahu wanted to get involved at all in this. He doesn't like big operations. He doesn't like being dragged in. He was just thinking about himself and his political career. And now he's in a situation where he has to satisfy the army and the Israeli public, and cutting a deal with Hamas, which would leave Hamas in power and elevate them as the saviors of thousands of Palestinian captives, is just simply not on the table for him. It's so what that leaves open the possibility of a much wider conflict, of a massive expansion. And I don't think anyone knows where this is going to go at this point, just based on my kind of my discussions with some diplomats who are on the periphery of the situation. They're pretty worried. And they're worried not only because Israel has no plan, because Israel has no red lines, but because, as we've seen from John Kirby, the spokesman for the White House National Security Council, the U.S. has no red lines either. He's explicitly said that. So what's next? What's next? I mean, the Israeli military is bombing the south of Gaza from Deir al-Balah in the middle all the way down to Khan Yunis and Rafah. They're starting the bombing there. They've taken over the northern Gaza Strip, and they're bombing the Indonesian hospital now after putting Shifa out of commission. The White House has signed off on the bogus Israeli intelligence and signed off on that assault on hospitals. Next, if this whole thing isn't wrapped up in 2 weeks, we could see the genocide intensify in the south and everyone being pushed towards Egypt. It's sort of unbelievable. So it all started back on October 7th with a series of lies that the White House again signed off on. I think we should talk about what's happening with the hospital situation, why hospitals are being targeted, and some of the lies that are being deployed to justify it. So Israel is determined to put all hospitals in the north of the Gaza Strip, where at least 50% of Gaza's population lives, out of service. They've said that there are covert military bases under these hospitals. So far, they have come up with no evidence of that. They're basically putting forward a bunch of different propaganda ploys to keep their own base in line, to make sure that at least the true believers, the friends of Israel, still convinced, but they're not convincing anyone outside that narrowing sphere of pro-Israel support within the West. And the real reason they need to put these hospitals out of commission is the same reason they're targeting bakeries across the north. It's because they need to eliminate the centers of life so they can carry out ethnic cleansing, move everyone to the south, then start pushing them into Egypt. And they're very open about this. We'll talk about that later. So first, the hospital, Al-Rantisi hospital, was targeted, and the Israeli military justified that the same way they're justifying Shifa, that, you know, it was a Hamas terror base. Al-Rantisi hospital is the only pediatric oncology ward in Gaza, so the only place where children can get cancer treatment, and it's been put out of commission with absurd propaganda like this Borat level sketch from what is this, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Hagari, who's one of the spokesmen.
In this room, there is a list. This list, in Arabic, this list says we are in an operation. The operation against Israel started in the 7th of October. This is a Guardian list where every terrorist writes his name and every terrorist has his own shift guarding the people that were here.
So, Aaron, you know what that list was.
Yes, this was the infamous days of the week. This was a calendar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the list of the terrorist names were actually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Maybe those were code names. and then the operation begins on October 7th because that's when all the casualties started flowing into the hospitals. I mean, things were normal before then. Anyway, they've just moved on from Al-Rantisi hospital after that disaster. Oh, and he was pointing to curtains that were inside the room as proof that hostages were being lined up there to deliver video testimony. Yeah, I think he was pointing from left to right, which was funny because Arabic and Hebrew go from right to left, as someone just pointed out. Then he pointed to a toilet in the room as proof that it was, a secret hostage center, because no one else goes to the bathroom except for hostages. Al-Rantisi hospital had been bombed many times. There were many casualties as Israel moved in there to take it over. And then they moved on to Al-Shifa hospital. And here's part of the presentation there. This is in the MRI room.
Grab bag, grab and go of a Hamas combatant behind the MRI machine. I'll show you what our troops exposed just minutes ago. In military terms, this is a grab bag, grab and go of a Hamas combatant. And if you zoom in and we get some light over here, what you will be able to see is military equipment. There is an AK-47. There are cartridges, ammo. There are grenades in here, of course, uniform, and all of this was hidden very conveniently, secretly behind the MRI machine.
Interesting. Grab and go. He keeps saying grab and go. What does MRI stand for? Just pop quiz.
Something
magnetic
yeah.
resonance imagery. Yeah. Magnetic. So it would probably be a bad idea to bring metal near an MRI machine. I don't know. Have you ever taken an MRI?
Yes, a long time ago.
Okay, well, they told you, because you usually, like, I have rules for like dress code at Grayzone, but you usually wear a lot of metal and gold chains, a lot of ice. Like, you're so iced out, normally you get freezer burn.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, when you go into an MRI room, they make you take all that off. You're not allowed to go into it with metal because it will disrupt the machine severely. Mm-hmm. So this guy is just mocking us. I mean, he's just You can't even wear clothes with metal on it. His Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, the spokesman, Borat clown, is just insulting our intelligence here. I mean, it is just absurd that and as a Jew, I welcome the stereotype of superior Jewish intelligence, and the Zionists are just destroying this stereotype right before our eyes. I mean, they are making, I mean, as long as they're operating under the flag of the so-called Jewish state, they're making us look pretty stupid, because this is just basic. But there's more to it here. There's more to it. This is clear evidence that we see. Just look at this image, because there's only one gun in there and there's some clips. This is clear evidence. This is clear proof that the Israeli army engaged in evidence tampering inside Shifa Hospital. And let me explain. Let me pull up something that I tweeted at the Fox News reporter, Trey Yingst, who's one of the biggest stenographers covering this conflict. Well, I can't actually show you, because Trey Yingst has blocked me after I exposed him. But I'll quote from the CNN report that they probably based on my tweet. Okay, so Fox's Trey Yingst was embedded with the Israeli military, and he went in after that presentation by Jonathan Conricus. Conricus gave him and other reporters a tour, and he took them to the MRI machine and showed him the grab and go bag. And then Trey Yingst tweeted out, "Here's me finding the weapons." But that grab and go bag contained 2 automatic weapons, 2 Kalashnikovs, when previously there had been 1, and more ammo clips than had previously been there. Now, unless a Hamas ghost had somehow slipped in there and added weapons, it was obvious that these weapons were added for effect by the Israeli military. And the tampering was so obvious that CNN, 12 hours after my tweet, after I exposed the Israeli army for planting evidence, published this CNN analysis. This is Blumenthal Grayzone analysis. Video suggests IDF might have rearranged weaponry at Al-Shifa prior to news crew visits. There's the 2. No, those are 3 guns. They added 3. There was only 1 gun in there before. An Israeli Defense Forces video on November 15 showing a tour of Hamas weaponry found at Al-Shifa Hospital shows less weaponry at the scene than in later footage filmed by international news crews, indicating the weapons may have been moved or placed there prior to news crews arriving. CNN compared footage published by the Israeli army online with footage taken by Fox News suckers, stenographers led by Trey Yingst, who blocked me. And Yingst later visits the scene when it's dark. He says the report's in the middle of the night. So Conricus was there during the day at 1:18 p.m. So Yingst was there at least 5 hours later. He's shown a bag located behind an MRI machine, and there are 2 AK-47s. However, the Israeli army video filmed earlier shows only 1 AK-47. It's unclear why. Okay, well, all the lies flow from there. They were planting the evidence, then they just laid out a bunch of guns. In one image, the Israeli army lays out, there are less guns there than you can find in the closet of most Republican congressmen. And that is supposed to justify them removing all these babies from their incubators, over 30 babies. Everybody in the ICU apparently died. The hospital courtyard was flooded with dead corpses, according to the medical director. They were being eaten by dogs. People were kidnapped. Journalists were arrested by the Israeli army outside the hospital. Thousands of people who were taking sanctuary there, whose homes had been blown up in the Al Rimal neighborhood by Israeli missiles, had to basically be expelled from their neighborhood, and who knows where they are. All of this based on the Israeli lie that this was some Hamas command and control center. And even if it was, it wouldn't have justified it. This is occupied territory. They don't have the right to fire a single bullet there.
Exactly. And that's the problem that this whole conversation misses about where the tunnels are, where the Hamas headquarters are. It doesn't matter actually where Hamas has its headquarters or tunnels. That's none of Israel's business. Israel's only business in Gaza is ending its occupation there, which it's controlled since 1967. People want to pretend as if the disengagement in 2005 was somehow an end to the occupation. Yes, Israel removed its fanatical settlers from Gaza in 2005 so it could focus on expanding its fanatical settlers in the occupied West Bank, and also to further prevent calls for a Palestinian state. But Israel still controls everything that goes into Gaza. It controls the food that goes in. So, for example, it can ban chocolates if it wants to, which it has. It counted the calories that it would let Palestinians eat without having a full-blown starvation crisis. So Israel is an occupying power, and occupying powers don't have rights. They only have obligations, and their obligation is to end the occupation.
Yeah. And so the whole discussion is just like twisted. It's like, here's video showing captives being treated at Shifa Hospital on October 7th. That justifies them destroying the entire hospital and removing 40 premature babies from their incubators. That justifies it. By the way, Hamas openly stated that they treated captives at hospitals 2 days before the Israeli military produced that footage. They're not denying it in any way. How did Israel treat wounded captives, wounded Hamas fighters? They executed them on camera. We saw that on October 7th. So I don't know. They have this new argument about finding a tunnel, but they're not allowing reporters into the tunnel for some reason. The Washington Post went with the Israeli military to this so-called tunnel that they've said they found, which looks like a drainage shaft and not a tunnel. If you actually watch the footage of the Israeli military sending a camera down there, it appears to cut at some point when it's dark and then shows a passageway beneath the drainage pipe. But the Washington Post reporter embedded with the Israeli military said that reporters were permitted only a 60-second glimpse into the shaft. They were not really allowed to conduct their own examination. And I wonder why. The pressure is so high on the Israeli military to produce something to justify this atrocity. And so we can look for new, more spectacular lies as they build the case for continuing their genocide and driving their death trains south. And I think that might be a good time to examine the rhetoric that we've been using or interrogate it further, because we are using this term genocide that we often dispute when the US government is putting it forward. Joe Biden saying Ukraine is a genocide. The State Department declaring that China is committing genocide in Xinjiang in the West, alleged atrocities against the Uyghur population. We hear them, they use genocide all the time. Samantha Power, the director of USAID, is the queen of the so-called genocide prevention industry. And
she made her career off of it. She made her career off by writing a book pretending to care about genocide. And the moment she's in power to be able to do something about genocide, she's in the process of promoting it. That's basically her career right there.
Yeah. And she's, of course, not resigning her position. Her book that made her famous about the genocide in Rwanda was all about how people in the Clinton administration, like Susan Rice, refused to resign over this genocide and just went along to get along. And that's what she's doing over the Gaza genocide. But is it a genocide? Well, the Israelis are pretty much saying that they aim to commit genocide. They're not really hiding it. I'm looking right now at an op-ed that was published in the Jerusalem Post, and it's by Gila Gamliel, who is the Minister of Intelligence of Israel. The Ministry of Intelligence has published this document calling for forcibly expelling the entire Gaza population and paying Egypt to take them in permanently to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And here's an article by once I get through an ad. This is pretty frustrating. Well, the Jerusalem Post will just like destroy your hard drive if you even try to visit it. So my hard drive is under extreme attack now for visiting this trashy site. Well, we'll pull it back up. Victory is an opportunity for Israel in the midst of crisis, writes Gila Gamliel, the Minister of Intelligence. One of the issues on which my office has been working diligently is how to proceed the day after Hamas has been defeated and annihilated. So the Gamliel goes on, blah, blah. Stop attacking my hard drive. Blah, blah, blah. People were raped. Everyone was burned alive, the Holocaust, etc., creating the case for what should be done next. And now we get to the real crux of the biscuit, as Frank Zappa put it. Another option is to promote the voluntary resettlement of Palestinians in Gaza. It is important that those who seek a life elsewhere be provided with that opportunity. This is an opportunity for those who say they support the Palestinian people to show these are not just empty words. So they want the UN to pony up billions of dollars to support the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. We've tried disengagement, conflict management, building high walls. These have all failed. We have to try something new and call on the international community to make it a reality. It'll be a win-win situation for the civilians of Gaza who seek a better life, to just leave their homes forever, to be purged forever, and on and on and on. They're saying this quite openly. And meanwhile, here's what took place on Israel's national broadcast station, Kan. A song featuring Israeli children, their version of We Are the World. Maybe it could have been called We Arm the World, or We Just Want to Exterminate Gaza, was played. A sort of Israeli genocide anthem sung by Israeli children was featured on the Israeli national broadcaster. And here it is. And the Electronic Intifada is subtitled it. Okay, at this point, you think they're lamenting that planes are bombing, destruction, destruction, she's singing. But the Israeli army is crossing the line to annihilate the Nazis. And they like it. It's good. They're singing in celebration of in another year there will be nothing in Gaza, to kill all the children in Gaza. In a year, we will annihilate everyone. Just to stew on that. Israeli children singing, within a year we will annihilate everyone. And then we will return to plow our fields. This is Zionism, folks. The pretty and the pure. I mean, does it get any more Nazi-esque than that? Love sanctified with blood. So that was eventually deleted from the website of Kan, Israel's national broadcaster. But you know, anywhere you look in Israeli TikTok, Israeli media, you're going to see calls for genocide, the celebration of genocide. Here's a news broadcast from Israeli Channel 14 about, embedding with the Israeli military in Gaza. And it'll kind of give you the sense of what kind of propaganda Israelis are being infused with each day, and the kind of the mood of the media. You need to put up a welcome to hell sign here, says the correspondent. And they're in the destroyed northern Gaza Strip now, rolling through with tanks. And he was very excited to ride in the tank. It's like an amusement park ride, he says, this tank that's destroying. I mean, the buildings behind him, I know personally, I've been in those buildings. They're all destroyed. First impression, Gaza's gone. There's no Gaza. Everything's destroyed. There's no roads, no houses, not a single house. Everything is ruined. In short, here, the guys did a great job, and we're only just getting started. Okay, so I don't even need to share any more of that, but it's just great job. We're only getting started. Israeli children singing to annihilate everyone. TikTok video after TikTok videos from the Israeli TikTok army in Gaza celebrating genocide with, DJs playing inside destroyed homes. And well, here's another. I mean, we have Israeli soldiers firing into Gaza to the sound of rock music, just lobbing shells into Gaza. This is like a typical TikTok. Where are these shells going? I doubt they know. There's a whole lot of targeting going on. So that post, by the way, was classified by Elon Musk's ex as hateful conduct. So you can't actually share that post by Ronnie Barkan, Israeli anti-Zionist activist. But we use this rhetoric of genocide because the Israelis are telling us what they're doing. They're saying they're going to do it.
Yeah. And as you pointed out for a long time, you and others, this is the logical result of Zionism. When you base your country on an ideology that deems you to be supreme, to be exceptional, to be above others, you, by extension, you have to then dehumanize the people you're ruling over. In this case of Israel, the people you've stolen your land from and displaced from their homes. And so it's always going to reach this point where even they can put out children's videos celebrating genocide. It's like, it's the logical, this has to happen in this society. There's no sort of middle ground you can have where you have, people living on occupied land and the land they've stolen and, feeling some kind of, seeing Palestinians as equal. You just can't if you're going to have a supremacist society. So this should not shock people. Israel's certainly gotten way more extreme than it used to across the political spectrum, but it was always going to go in this direction as long as it clung to this fundamental notion that they are superior and that they have this inherent land that they have this inherent right to the land that they've stolen from its indigenous people.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't completed the genocide that will allow them to, in their view, live in peace, or as you see in that video. I mean, that video of Israeli children singing for the extermination of Gaza is a really good document of the Zionist mentality at this stage, because they're saying we need to exterminate everyone or annihilate everyone in order to plow our fields, in order to continue to live. That's the settler colonial mentality. As long as you're in the settler colonial phase, you first of all don't have a metropole to return to, like the French or British colonists who populated India and Algeria. You can't just go back and say, we failed. They don't want us here. We got Mau-Mau'd, like the British did in Kenya. So you have to fight for your existence and eliminate the indigenous population or you lose and you go away. It's a zero-sum game. It's like the American West in the 1840s or 1850s, where the settler colonial population was carrying out a genocide against the Lakota Sioux and the Arapaho in order to secure the existence of the United States. And once they did so, then they moved forward to a putative liberal democracy and passed the Voting Rights Act of 1964. I don't know if Israel will ever get to that phase. They're just perpetually in genocide mode. And what we're seeing is an attempt by them to finish the game, to finish what was begun in 1948. And this was explicitly expressed by the former head of the Israeli Shin Bet, Avi Dichter, who is now the Minister of Agriculture and a member of Knesset. He said that we are engaged in a new Nakba. The Nakba is the systematic ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in 1948, and we're just trying to finish the job. We're actually rolling with Nakba of Gaza.
כשאנחנו רואים את התמונות של מיליון תושבי עזה הולכים עם דגלים לבנים דרומה, זאת אחת ממטרות, זו מטרה פסיכולוגית של מבצע. זה תוצר, זה אירוע אסטרטגי, זה זמני.
זה בראש ובראשונה אירוע מבצעי. צריך להבין, יש לנו שם הרבה מאוד לוחמים שלנו, שצריכים לפעול בשטח מאוד מאוד צפוף. לפעול בשטח צפוף, כמו שם.
Lower the volume.
הוא באוכלוסייה, אתה רוצה לצמצם את מספר...
Is this a Nakba or something temporary? We are now rolling with the Nakba of Gaza. So he's pretty open about it. He calls it Nakba 2023. And he's not the only one saying this in the Israeli leadership. They are expressing clearly, unequivocally, their intention to commit genocide. And the United States is saying, whoa, we can't believe that they're doing this. We expected a much more targeted, precise operation.
Wasn't it a law in Israel, or at least a proposed law, maybe it didn't pass, that you were not allowed to acknowledge the Nakba?
Yeah. It was introduced by Yisrael Beitenu, the Russian Israeli party that came out of Likud. It was supported by Likud back in like 2010. It was called the Nakba law. And if you observe the Nakba on the day of Israel's Independence Day, you face criminal penalties. So now,
now it's okay to recognize the Nakba so long as you're calling for another one. That's basically the Israeli policy.
Yeah. It's nice of them that they're acknowledging that a Nakba took place in 1948. There was like a huge society-wide debate in Israel. A guy was put on trial actually for documenting the Tantura massacre in 1948. His name is Sami Katz. He was an Israeli historian. He actually went on trial. And now they're just like, yeah, we did it. We're going to do it again. Give us your money, America.
Not too long ago, I think some Israeli veterans of 1948 acknowledged that there is a mass grave under a Tel Aviv beach. Did you see that? That came out not too long ago. And that's the legacy. That's what they're trying to continue now, basically. And they're repeating it. I mean, we've seen the mass graves inside Gaza. At Shifa, I believe they had a mass grave, right? Because they have no place to put the bodies.
Yeah, you can see that in our mini documentary that's up at YouTube. You can see the piles of dead bodies covered in blankets in the courtyard of Al Shifa because there's nowhere to put them. There's no waste disposal. I mean, it's a catastrophe for a medical facility because there's no sanitation, there's no water, there's no fuel, but there's people there who are grievously injured. Where's the American Medical Association on this? Have they said anything? Nope. Where are all the celebrities who cried out, who went to meet with Zelensky?
Yeah. Yeah, they're missing in action.
Where's Sean Penn? I actually, we both just know some celebrities just through whatever, through life. I've actually been lobbying some of them. And they're not responding.
Yeah.
It's like the Pope has called for a ceasefire. The Financial Times has called for a ceasefire. Some members of Congress are starting to step up and call for a ceasefire. There are some prominent civil society leaders calling for a ceasefire, but I can't get any of these celebrities to call for just a ceasefire, to just call for peace. It was so much easier for them to call for war, for a proxy war in Ukraine against Russia, than to actually just call for peace. I wonder why that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they going to like lose their representation from a creative artists agency run by Ari Emanuel, who's actually leading an initiative of Jewish Zionist billionaires to promote Israel's war? Is that what it could be?
Well, the answer is yes. Yes. I mean, I think you're asking a rhetorical question, but yes, the answer is yes. We saw that one agent at CIA who was demoted after she posted something about a genocide going on in Gaza. I mean, it's every anti-Semitic stereotype is being shown, it's like these people are validating anti-Semitic stereotypes in terms of Jews control everything. Certainly when it comes to Hollywood, Jews in Hollywood, Zionist Jews in Hollywood are doing their best to prove that stereotype. Absolutely.
Yeah. While complaining that they're victims and that, they're like, we are facing the worst anti-Semitism ever. And if you deny this, then we're going to fire you and prevent you from ever getting a job anywhere because we have the power to do so.
Yeah.
At our investment firms and movie studios. And we're going to run a multi-billion-dollar campaign to promote the destruction of Gaza. I mean, it's amazing. Ben Shapiro on a kind of smaller level really is representing an anti-Semitic stereotype by trying to punish his employee or shut her down, Candace Owens, for tweeting a biblical verse, "Blessed are the peacemakers." She really screwed him. I don't know if you saw the Norman Finkelstein interview she conducted.
I did. It was great. It was actually one of the best interviews I've seen Norman do. He was really on point. He didn't go on these long tangents that I think sometimes go too far and go on for too long. He was really on point. And I wonder, I mean, Ben Shapiro, he really should be having Norman Finkelstein on to debate him. And the way Norman's been trolling Ben Shapiro has been really funny. He said
Norman said, do I have to wear a diaper and be a baby in order to get him to? Because first he started out by saying, I'll like enroll in college if he'll agree to debate me. And then he's like, do I have to wear a diaper? So Candace Owens has him on, and she starts out by saying, I actually don't know a lot about this conflict, and I want to hear from a Jewish person who opposes Zionism. It was amazing to see that. And the amount of respect she showed him and just pure intellectual curiosity, because she was taken on a trip. I think she was taken to the dedication of the embassy, the U.S. embassy in Jerusalem, because she's been groomed as this kind of like conservative incorporated Black Republican. They need Black faces to promote their agenda, which often runs counter to the economic interests of Black people in America. And she started to think outside the box, which is just so dangerous. And had Norman Finkelstein on. I mean, this is a signal moment. Alex Jones, he is now denouncing U.S. aid to Israel. He's been on the side of the NWO when it comes to Israel all along with Paul Joseph Watson. They've been pathetic shills for Israel. They've been the most blue-pilled personalities in media, and now Alex Jones is calling it out. I mean, Israel is losing conservatives now in a way I never could have imagined. I just I thought I was dreaming when I saw Norman Finkelstein on the Daily Wire.
I just saw that Cardi B called out Biden for trying to get over $100 billion for Ukraine and Israel, and she said she's done with him. And I was watching, I was thinking, how long before Jonathan Greenblatt and the ADL call Cardi B an anti-Semite because she opposes more military aid for Israel and Ukraine? I bet it's only a matter of minutes. It's coming anytime.
Yeah, I mean, well, they love controlling Black people, the Israel lobby, because it's a dangerous constituency that's faced oppression, that is just naturally suspicious of what's being done to the Palestinians. And that, to just be frank, has had a pretty bad history of interactions with the Jewish establishment. in big cities.
Yep.
I mean, you have the whole Jesse Jackson comment about Hymietown, where he basically his 1984 campaign for the presidency was destroyed over that. There's still resentment over that. Danny Glover, they targeted him. He was one of the first Black celebrities to speak out for Palestine. And they like to just like buy. And so they try to buy people off. They have the like Haim Saban Fellowship where they, you know, anyone who gets elected at a historically Black college as class president immediately gets a call from AIPAC, and they offer them a free all expense paid trip to DC to the AIPAC conference. And then they treat them like extremely important people there. And they're like, hey, we're going to hook you up with a job after college. You want a good job in an investment firm? What do you want? Law firm? And I mean, look what what just happened with Van Jones.
Oh my God. By the way, the image is showing here. Here's Kyrie Irving of the NBA, the Dallas Mavericks star point guard, wearing a keffiyeh, showing his solidarity.
Well, remember what happened with Kyrie over, he was opposing vaccine mandates, and the ADL targeted him. Well, he was being, you know, seen as this huge threat to the NBA because all the players knew it was bogus. Like the NBA Players Union was the first players union to make sure that they could smoke marijuana and not be, you know, destroyed. Yeah. Yeah. They kind of just know that this is bogus. And Kyrie speaks out, says he's not going to take the jab. And then he starts being attacked for being an anti-Semite because he had expressed some public interest in some Black Hebrew Israelite propaganda, which had some bizarre theories about Jews. And he's forced to pay the ADL for them to go away. He actually had to
shakedown.
It was a shakedown operation, just like we're seeing with Elon.
Yeah, yeah. Where Elon said some stupid anti-Semitic thing, and as a result, he gets attacked by the ADL, and he compensates by saying he's going to ban people who say from the river to the sea.
Yeah, and maybe change the algorithm to benefit pro-Israel forces.
Yeah,
just to save his own skin. I'm kind of tempted to play the Van Jones clip before we
for sure
move on.
For sure.
Where is it? I mean, I was watching it live and I was just cracking up.
So Van Jones spoke at this solidarity rally with Israel in DC. Other speakers were Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, the Republican speaker, Mike Johnson, some of those fanatical evangelical bigot preachers, the ones who've said before that like Hitler was part of God's plan to drive the Jews to Israel, things like that. What's his name? Hagee?
Yeah, Pastor John Hagee, the leading Christian Zionist who said that the Antichrist was half Jewish and homosexual with fierce features. This is the guy they bring there. And like Schumer, Charles, we need to stop Hamas. And then he like comes out with Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries, and they're like joining hands like it's We Are the World in this bipartisan show of support for genocide. I mean, whenever there's a show of bipartisanship in Washington, a lot of people are going to die. But then they bring on Van Jones, the CNN commentator who used to be the head of a radical Maoist direct action group in the Bay Area. I've known him for years. As soon as I met him, I'm like, this guy is on some kind of hustle because he was trying to get in with Obama and he was promoting all kinds of green initiatives. I'm like, if this guy's like into that, like green, renewable power, and you know, he's coming from the radical left, he's definitely a hustler. And he shows up at the rally, the genocide rally on the National Mall. He was clearly paid. So yeah, here's what happened. I mean, it was such a telling incident that says everything about pro-Israel forces today. I got to turn the volume up.
Something about what's happening here.
Let's start it over.
I do feel powerful is to maybe do something about what's happening here. Let's take a stand here against anti-Jewish bigotry. Let's take a stand against Muslims. Let's take a stand here against hatred. Let's take a stand here.
So, I mean, it doesn't show you exactly what happened, but basically Van Jones came out. and tried to sound a little bit balanced and said that he prays that the captives will all be released and that the bombing of children in Gaza will stop. And the crowd just went apoplectic, began booing him and started chanting no ceasefire. And that's what you can hear. And it shook him so much that he had a Freudian slip and he said, let's take a stand against Muslims.
Yeah, when he meant to say, let's take a stand against anti-Muslim bigotry. But the problem with him making that slip is the crowd agrees with his mistake. So when he says, let's take a stand against Muslims, that's their message, actually. And that's what he's actually supporting by being there, is these people do want to take a stand against Muslims by killing them because, you know, they're driven by bigotry. And him trying to pander to them and find some middle ground. I'm sorry, Van Jones. Like, there's no middle ground with people who support mass murder.
Yeah.
There just isn't.
Well, when you're being paid, you can find some middle ground. I wonder how much he was paid. Because he, you know, like last year or 2 years ago, he actually did a speech for Jewish federations. And he's just such an avaricious character. Let's look at Van Jones from 1993 just to understand what a complete and total sellout he is. Back when he was a radical street activist in the Bay. What is with the volume here? All right, the volume's still bad.
This dudes could do that in 1970. This dudes could do that in 1985, 86, in 1993, when we have the United States government building a death camp, a concentration camp for black people who have done nothing wrong but get sick and want justice. That's all they've done wrong.
So he's denouncing some kind of it's like a prison camp.
It sounds like Guantanamo. This is 93. It sounds like maybe.
Oh, he's talking about Haiti and that Haitian migrants have been put in Guantanamo.
Yeah.
Can't close that death camp.
If we can't close that death camp.
If this generation cannot prevent another Japanese American internment.
If this generation cannot prevent another Japanese American internment.
In our lifetime, we should all get haircuts and go get regular jobs and give it up.
We should all go to get haircuts and regular jobs and give it all up. And those words really resonate.
Prophecy. Van Jones fulfilled his own prophecy. Yeah.
30 years later, Van Jones has gotten a haircut and a real job, and he's shilling for the pro-Israel lobby. Now let's talk about. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say I ran into Van Jones. I ran into Van Jones about a year ago, maybe in a restaurant, and you know, I looked at him very briefly, and he noticed me looking at him, and he gave me a nod, and the nod was like as if he thought I was showing him respect, and I really, it's like, he's like, you know, and I really want to tell him, you know, just what happened to you, man. Like, cause he used to say righteous things. He did. But anyway, that's his problem.
I saw him right before he got the CNN gig at a memorial for Giuliano Merhamis, who was the Israeli and Palestinian. Like his dad was Palestinian. His mom was Israeli. He was a sort of legendary activist in Israel, Palestine, who was killed. And there was a memorial for him in New York, and Van Jones was there wearing a kufiya. I mean, it's just so pathetic. He actually did a verse on a spoken word album for Palestine in 2003, I believe. So I guess, you know, everybody has a price. So let's talk about another pro-Israel shill that you encountered, Aaron. You were in a restaurant with Van Jones, you just said, and you were on the quiet car with Senator Chris Coons.
Senator, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but when I call for a ceasefire,
who are you?
I'm a journalist. My name's Aaron Mate. When I call for a ceasefire in Gaza, you have 4,600 children killed. 46. I know it's a quiet car.
This is a quiet car.
I understand, but children are dying. Children are dying, sir.
You're speaking in a very quiet way.
I was actually trying to respect the rules.
U.S. weapons are killing kids in Gaza.
Who are you?
My name is Aaron Mate. I'm a journalist.
Nice to meet you, Aaron.
Likewise.
Please stop talking to me.
I'm sorry, sir. It's of dire importance. More than 11,000 civilians, as we're talking, being killed. I'm a journalist for the Grayzone.
What's the Grayzone?
It's a U.S.-based news website.
I want to do like a dubstep remix of him saying that.
Thank you. And right now, with our support, kids are being killed. I'm sorry. With our weapons, I'm asking you to explain why not call for a ceasefire.
You're bothering me and everyone else around.
Kids in Gaza are being massacred. I'm asking you to please explain why not call for a ceasefire.
Stop. Sir, could I please have some help here?
So, I mean, most people watching this are familiar with the exchange. It was pretty impressive. You went on for another 2 minutes, just pushing him and pushing him. You got a statement out of him where he supports what Israel's doing.
Yeah.
And then
it's interesting. Notice how hard he's trying not to answer the question. So he's asking me questions. Who are you? Who do you work for? Then he asked me, how do you get this seat? I paid for that seat. It was fate, Senator Coons. I'm sorry, but we literally were sitting across from each other. And it takes him a long time before he finally does give me some kind of answer where he says, I support Israel's right to defend itself, and Hamas killed 1,400 civilians. I had to correct him on that because the figure is actually 1,200, and it wasn't even all civilians. But anyway, and just look how hostile he is towards someone trying to ask him about his own position. If that's your position, you should be able to defend it and not try to avoid it and try to even he even threatens to have me thrown off the train in that clip. He says, I'll have you thrown off this train, as if he's some kind of Amtrak conductor on top of being a senator. But he did eventually have me thrown off the train, because after our exchange, I tweeted that clip. It went viral. And then I had moved seats, because I was forced to. And when he saw me again, soon after that is when I got kicked off. So I would bet anything that him just seeing me after seeing that our clip had gone viral, which I'm sure he saw, that's when he asked for them to kick me off the train, and they complied.
He just had you punished, and then it's a very morally weak position that he's in. The senators don't expect to have to be able to be willing to explain themselves. Traditionally in Congress, you just kind of vote for anything that AIPAC brings down the pike. Mm-hmm. And you don't really have to think about it or explain yourself. And now for the first time, they're being confronted everywhere. Like Jack Reed, chair of the Armed Services Committee, was confronted twice at the Politico Defense Conference. Members of Congress, Justin Trudeau, is confronted twice in Vancouver and in a mosque, I believe, in Toronto. You're seeing it all across the West, and they don't like it. They have this aura of inviolability that you really penetrated there. And in no way did you violate the rules of Amtrak. According to the rules, you have to speak in a subdued voice in the quiet car.
Exactly.
It was amazing. I mean, you never rose above the quiet car, you never rose to an unacceptable tone. You kept within the rules all along.
But he didn't. He was a lot louder than me, I think. And while claiming also that I'm disturbing everyone around him, which is just such a lie. I mean, nobody was disturbed. People who could see us were watching. They were enthralled at this exchange, but nobody was disturbed. And he was disturbed because he doesn't want to be questioned about supporting mass murder, including mass murder of kids.
Well, what's disturbing, and that's something I've experienced, is sleeping under Israel's bombs in Gaza. And never knowing if your roof is going to collapse on your head and kill you and your whole family. And just the sound of it is so terrifying, along with the sound of the drone, the ever-present drone that's watching you. So Chris Coons needs to know that there are no quiet cars in Gaza. And exactly. I think everyone appreciates that you brought that, just some sense of discomfort to him. Everyone who supports this needs to be made to feel uncomfortable. And that's what you did. And you're taking off your car, but you made it in time to Tim Pool's compound.
I did make it down to Tim Pool's compound. Yes, that was my destination. And honestly, my aim was not to make him feel uncomfortable, although that was the result. My aim was to get him to answer for his own policy. And I'm a journalist. He's a senator. Even if I weren't a journalist, obviously I had just as much a right to ask him. But I mean, he's supporting this policy. He should be able to at least answer for it.
And Chris Coons, I mean, more than supporting this policy, he's Biden's proxy in Delaware. Like, he is Biden's underling.
Yeah.
He is more than any senator close to President Joe Biden, and whatever Biden does, Coons supports.
Yep.
And he also was extremely aggressive in supporting the Ukraine proxy war. He's just another pro-war Democrat in a deeply undemocratic Democratic Party. So that I think yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything else. I mean, you were smeared pretty relentlessly in mainstream media for doing that.
Oh yeah, well, it's so funny. It's like for all the partisanship you see on Fox News and the right-wing media, everyone who covered this from the right wing closed ranks around defending Chris Coons and attacking me. So, for example, here is Fox News. Look at this headline. It's so funny. Democratic senator confronted by left-wing reporter on Amtrak. You are bothering me. Senator Chris Coons tells man to stop badgering him on Amtrak, or I'm going to have you thrown off this train. Now, is there anything missing from this headline that might be relevant to the story? It's the fact that I was questioning him about his Gaza policy. The way this headline is written, it sounds like I just came up to him and started bothering him like a pest. When really I was trying to question about his policy, but Fox News can't even bring itself to mention the topic we were discussing, which is the U.S.-backed Israeli mass murder campaign in Gaza. So that's them closing ranks to defend Chris Coons, and the article goes on. It's along those themes. And then another example is the New York Post, which said this. It said, oh, wait, no, that's not that. Wait a second. 1 second. Sorry. Let me get that up. The New York Post basically said that I accosted.
It explicitly said that you accosted him, like you grabbed him by the arm and threw him against a wall in the cafe car. And
sir, there it is. Democratic Senator Chris Coons accosted by far left journalist on Amtrak. Again, they're missing the topic under discussion, which is Gaza. And then it has a quote, I'm going to have you thrown off this train. So this actually headline makes it sound as if I'm the one who said to him, I'm going to have you thrown off this train, because it sounds like I'm accosting him and saying that. And really, that's like what he said to me.
You're some Antifa hooligan.
Yeah. And again, they, omit the topic we were discussing, which is Gaza. And the New York Post goes on to repeat lies about the Grayzone. They say that we deny chemical attacks in Syria. No, actually, we report on leaked documents from the OPCW showing that there was a cover-up of an investigation in Syria, and that investigation falsely implicated Syria in a chemical attack. And it also says that we deny repression of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Actually, we report on the ridiculous claims pushed by state-funded right-wing bigots that China's committing genocide in Xinjiang, which nobody has
in order to
refuted.
justify sanctions and a new Cold War.
Yeah, exactly. And a good illustration of how important that reporting is because right now we're backing an actual genocide inside of Gaza. And all these people who claim to care about the plight of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, or any of them calling this a genocide, even though, unlike in China, Israel is actually bombing people, murdering people, attacking hospitals, committing what an actual genocide is. And part of the point is of the Grayzone's reporting is, like, if you're going to call what China's doing in Xinjiang genocide, you're cheapening that term. You can call it repression if you want, and we've quoted people who call it repression, but that's not genocide. And the New York Post didn't have the intellectual honesty to understand that distinction. And so anyway, that's what we got. And here's one more clip. This is Fox and Friends. Basically accusing me of questionable journalistic tactics, which is funny because right now they have a Fox News reporter embedded with Israeli forces in their assault on Gaza. And as you pointed out before, Max, parroting their lies about Al-Shifa Hospital. So that sounds like a questionable journalistic tactic to me. But anyway, this is how Fox News reported it. And watch how giddy they are that I got kicked off the train.
Definitely a questionable journalistic tactic there, and Coons eventually appeared to get and move.
Alex, I'm curious.
Did they throw him off the train?
Yeah.
30 minutes later, they did. And they got to Philadelphia at the next stop.
Yeah, he works for a controversial news outlet, one that is criticized for putting up some pro-Russia propaganda and whatnot. So his tactics were never going to be orthodox. Coons' office did eventually put out a statement saying that they condemn the loss of life for any civilians, but that the focus has to be on Hamas, something that more establishment Democrats, Republicans at large have.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So
putting up some pro-Russian propaganda, like Fox News covers half of what we do on Ukraine.
Yeah, and also during Russiagate, I was on Fox News pretty regularly, so I don't know what they're talking about. Like all of a sudden now that like we've continued our tradition of reporting accurately about Israel, now all of a sudden we're pro-Russia and we're non grata, and they're cheering me being thrown off the train. And again, that style of speaking, it's so lazy. They've been criticized for putting up some pro-Russia propaganda.
Some say
it's such a lazy innuendo, and it's the aim of it is to taint everything we do and make it so you don't have to take anything that we say seriously. Don't try to actually interrogate our actual views and evidence. It's such a lazy smear tactics, and everybody does it. It's whether it's Fox News or MSNBC.
Well, everyone's gone back to their 2003 battle stations. I feel like we're in the so-called war on terror all over again. You turn on Fox News and it's just like I'm having flashbacks. I'm wondering when like Alan Colmes is going to materialize. It's just, and it's
I believe he passed away, so he probably won't. Yeah, but yeah,
he was a decent man.
He was,
and no one else on Fox at this point is. I wonder. I mean, it would seem like impossible for Tucker to even exist there at this point, since he's taking a somewhat critical line.
Yeah, no way. Well, should we move on to Joe Biden and how all this is impacting?
Yeah. I mean, it's the perfect transition because in closing, I mean, the Uniparty has really consolidated again around committing genocide in Gaza. Joe Biden, one of the most reliably pro-Israel senators and one of the probably the largest recipient all time of any active politician of AIPAC money, is presiding over this whole thing. I don't know if he's really presiding over anything, but it's not as though he's going to impose red lines. Jake Sullivan's running it. Smaller, lesser known people like John Feiner at the State Department, Tony Blinken is rushing around anxiously attempting some kind of diplomacy to keep the war going and to limit the damage regionally. But this is Biden's war, and this is will be one of the greatest stains on his legacy, if not the greatest stain.
And it might sink his election chances, because look at this new poll from NBC News.
Yeah.
Biden's approval rating has declined to the lowest level of his presidency, 40%. A strong majorities of all voters disapprove of his handling of foreign policy. Among voters aged 18 to 34, a whopping 70% disapprove of Biden's handling of the Israel-Gaza war. By the way, I hate that. It's not a war. It's a massacre. But anyway, the headline here is that 70% of young voters, 18 to 34, disapprove of how Biden has handled the Gaza crisis.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's very similar to the way that the Iraq War shaped our generation and our view of George W. Bush. And I see no distinction now between George W. Bush and Joe Biden, considering the neocons that support Joe Biden who are shaping Bush's policy. I mean, look at David Frum. He completely supports what Biden's doing. Bill Kristol, I mean, he's raising money for the Democrats now. Bill Kristol created the kind of intellectual and political context for the neocons to come into the George W. Bush administration. And so they found their war again, and they found their man in Biden, and young people are not having it. It is searing for them, young progressives who are taken for granted by the Democratic Party every year. And I think one of the most unbelievable protests I've seen so far. I mean, there was the huge Jewish Voice for Peace protest at the U.S. Capitol, which was barely covered by U.S. media. And then we had the 300,000 strong march in Washington, D.C. But here's another sort of Jewish-led protest outside, targeting the Democratic Party directly, a fundraiser for the Democratic National Congressional Committee at the DNC headquarters. And it was immediately attacked by police. They're chanting for a ceasefire. Police are pulling them away. The building is filled with Democratic members of Congress.
look, I just got thrown. People getting thrown down the stairs. People getting thrown down the stairs.
That sounds like Chuck Modiani.
Yo.
By the way, thank you to AOC and the squad for funding the Capitol Police as your first vote in Congress, and then funding their expansion. That was the Capitol Police beating and yanking protesters downstairs who were protesting for a ceasefire outside the DNC. Brad Sherman, Democratic representative from suburban Los Angeles, who is a asset of the Israel lobby, longtime asset, called them insurrectionists and brutal thugs and said that his safety was threatened and that they had to be evacuated, which is totally false. But they spun out the January 6th narrative on those protesters.
Yeah, and Max, would it shock you to learn that your favorite CNN anchor, Jake Tapper, called the protesters violent and anti-Semitic?
The video this week of the pro-Palestinian protest outside the DNC that turned violent outside the Democratic headquarters, and there were members in there, not all of them, but some of them were with the Democratic Socialists of America, the New York branch, which celebrated on October 7th, saying that it was legitimate resistance. At another rally just down the street from here at Union Station, crowds were chanting "From the river to the sea, long live the Intifada." What do you make of this as a Jewish American, a proud progressive, a Democrat? There's anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party these days.
Well, I mean, there's anti-Semitism everywhere these days, as we were discussing with Elon Musk. And I mean, we're talking about a problem that goes back thousands of years, obviously. I was very disappointed to see what happened over at the DNC the other day. I mean, I'm glad that there are young people who are taking an interest in peace and social justice, and those people I encourage. But for those who are somehow tempted to engage in pushing and shoving, like you know, Kevin
pushing
McCarthy,
and shoving,
in Congress, but doing it outside, I'm totally opposed to that. They should study the history of nonviolent movements in America.
Oh
like
my God.
The women's movement, the civil rights movement, the LGBT.
They're doing exactly what the civil rights movement did.
That have been the great civilizing movements of our time and of America.
So that's Jamie Raskin. He's he identifies for some reason as a progressive member of Congress. Speaking to Jake Tapper, who calls these protesters anti-Semitic, and they repeat not only that lie that these people are anti-Semites, but also that they were violent toward the police at the DNC. And that's Jamie Raskin trying to have it both ways. He says, you know, I encourage them, I support those who are interested in social justice, but then he throws them under the bus by calling them violent and anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I mean, and Jake Tapper's cornering him. Jake Tapper is just running the show at CNN on this, openly flaunting his ideological commitment to Zionism and his obsession with this peculiar form of Jewish identity in which you occupy the anchor's chair and occupy an extremely privileged position in society while claiming to be extremely oppressed and under threat of a second Holocaust at all times. Him and Dana Bash, you know, it's absolutely disgusting. So he's cornering Raskin because Raskin was such a little tool for the Democrats on January 6th and Russiagate, and being a McCarthyite and betraying the legacy of his father, Marcus Raskin, who was an anti-war activist, and his son, his late son, Tommy, who took his own life, who would have stood with those protesters, undoubtedly, who is actually a contributor to antiwar.com. And, you know, that's what the civil rights movement did. Those tactics were modeled explicitly after the civil rights movement. They're locking arms together and they're taking they're doing the, what Martin Luther King called like soul force or spiritual jujitsu, where you actually take the blows of the security forces or the enforcers of authority in order to expose it.
Yep.
That's what you would think they would do, but these people don't actually believe in the civil rights movement. They like it. It's like how white people like black music from 40 years ago. It's like it's no longer threatening to like Dr. Dre, so you can bob your head to it. Dr. Dre is like 60 years old. He doesn't even go by Dr. Dre anymore. It's the same thing. Like they don't want to see real activism anymore. And that's why it's so important to keep doing it. But more importantly, you must not be taken for granted by the Democratic Party, because they think that this spring, the genocide will be over. Israel will have moved towards a clean resolution. Maybe everybody's in the Sinai Desert in tents or something happened, but it's over. And we're supposed to just forget about this, as Americans so often do, adopt historical amnesia, and then focus on horse race politics. And they are going to deploy all the familiar propaganda about the bad orange Hitler who's going to come into the Oval Office and get indicted 42 more times unless we vote for Biden. And you just can't do it. We can't. This time was too much. We can't let it happen. There needs to be a way of registering discontent at the polls in November, or all those protests and all the police bicycles that smashed you in the face and the pepper spray and the indignities and humiliation that you took there to make your point, being called an anti-Semite on national TV, even if you're Jewish. It will have been for nothing if you give away your vote again to the Democrats. So there has to be a way of registering your discontent. Maybe it's writing in Palestine, writing in a watermelon, or voting for someone like Jill Stein, who has called for Netanyahu's prosecution.
Yep.
Jill Stein, who, by the way, had just had her account removed by Meta. They said it's not properly verified, but they offered her no opportunity to verify her account and no opportunity to respond to this removal. This is election meddling by big tech, influenced by the undemocratic Democratic Party, because they don't want anyone to be able to register, to make a protest vote, register their discontent. Now, Jill Stein, I think, is the biggest threat, because Cornel West has sort of forfeited his campaign by leaving the Green Party. So there has to be a way of making them pay. They have to be ruthlessly punished for what they have done to Gaza, to Palestine, and to you, taking you for granted and abusing you on national TV and your reputation. It can't be allowed to stand. Never forget this moment.
Well, here is John Kirby. He is the spokesperson for the National Security Council, being asked at the White House about Joe Biden's new nickname, which is Genocide Joe.
Protesters here in DC, in New York, across the country, they've settled on a nickname for the president. They've been calling him Genocide Joe. They wrote it on the gates. Do you have a response from the White House to that nickname?
We're not worried about nicknames and bumper stickers. I mean, it's First Amendment, free speech. The president's focused on, as he wrote in his op-ed, on making sure that we can continue to support Israel.
The president's focused on continuing this genocide. He's not worried about people calling him Genocide Joe. He's focused on continuing the genocide.
As they fight a terrible terrorist group, Hamas, and as we all work together to get humanitarian assistance in and get people out, including hostages. I said this the other day. Again, people can say what they want on the sidewalk, and we respect that. That's what the First Amendment's about. But this word genocide is getting thrown around in a pretty inappropriate way by lots of different folks. What Hamas wants, make no mistake about it, is genocide. They want to wipe Israel off the map. They've said so publicly, more than one occasion. In fact, just recently. And they've said that they're not going to stop. What happened on the 7th of October is going to happen again and again and again. And what happened on the 7th of October? Murder, slaughter of innocent people in their homes or at a music festival. That's genocidal intentions. Yes, there are too many civilian casualties in Gaza. Yes, the numbers are too high. Yes, too many families are grieving. And yes, we can.
It's such an extraordinary line. The numbers are too high, which means there's an acceptable level of Palestinian civilian casualties for John Kirby. And of course, the numbers are not too high because he's doing nothing to stop it. But even rhetorically,
numbers are too high, but we have to keep going.
Exactly.
Continue to urge the Israelis to be as careful and cautious as possible. That's not going to stop, from the president right on down. But Israel is not trying to wipe the Palestinian people off the map. Israel's not trying to wipe Gaza off the map. Israel's trying to defend itself against a genocidal terrorist threat. So when we're going to start, if we're going to start using that word, fine, let's use it appropriately.
What an extraordinary line. So as Israel is bombing Gaza everywhere, attacking hospitals, destroying civilian infrastructure, forcing hundreds of thousands of people, millions, like over 1 million at this point, out of their homes, killing. At this point, the official toll has been frozen because it's impossible to count the dead anymore. So even the official toll is a vast undercount. He's going to accuse Hamas of trying to commit a genocide, not Israel. When Israeli officials openly talk about wiping Gaza off the map, of taking it over, of ethnically cleansing Palestinians. I mean, all the elements of genocide are there, and he's the one supporting it.
And it's amazing that question got through. I mean, it really shows how much their backs are up against the wall now. If the White House press pool is asking them about genocide, I mean, I put that issue forward at the State Department. Sam Husseini has been putting it forward, asking whether they fear being prosecuted in the future for genocide. It is a genocide. It's clear that it's taking place. It looks like John Kirby wasn't briefed on what Israeli leaders are saying about genocide. But the fact that he was asked that really shows how much traction activists are getting right now. And it can't be forgotten.
And I'll say this again. This is a point I really want to stress. Hamas has a more accommodating position when it comes to Israel's existence as a state than Israel has ever had about Palestinians' rights as a people. There's no Israeli government, whether it's like this far-right government under Netanyahu or like the most dovish liberal government under, I don't know, like Yitzhak Rabin or Ehud Barak, that's ever accepted Palestinians' minimal rights to exist in what already for them is a huge compromise, just taking 22% of historic Palestine, which is the West Bank and Gaza. That's what the PLO accepted. And there's no Israeli government that's ever accepted that. They've always insisted on their right to settle the land, have these massive settlement blocks in the West Bank that make life for Palestinians impossible. So the actual people want to wipe people off the map are Israeli governments, and whether it's on the far right of Israel or the dovish liberal side, which doesn't really exist anymore, but it did used to exist. That's the problem here, and that's what John Kirby is supporting, and that's why this current iteration of the Israeli government is currently committing a genocide by trying to wipe even more Palestinians off the map.
Yeah. And Hamas doesn't have the power to commit genocide, even if they wanted to. They don't have the ability to do so. Israel does, and it's thanks to John Kirby's employers who are just shipping thousands more missiles, munitions, howitzers, GBU bunker buster bombs to Israel with much less transparency than we're even getting on the shipments of arms to Ukraine.
Oh, there's no transparency. The Pentagon won't even say, it won't even itemize the kind of weaponry it's sending to Israel and how much money it's all worth. It's been totally kept secret for obvious reasons, because they know that Israel's committing crimes, war crimes. They know that the U.S. is complicit in it. And that's why now we've had these extraordinary statements for 2 consecutive weeks. First Jake Sullivan last week, and now John Feiner, who's his deputy this week, when asked point blank on Meet the Press whether or not Israel is obeying international law, they say outright, we're not going to play judge and jury. It's like and the reason why they're not going to play judge and jury is because they know the answer. They actually know the verdict. They know the verdict. They know what it is. Here, I'll show you this clip. This is John Feiner, who's Deputy National Security Advisor, speaking to Meet the Press.
Israel's actions at Al-Shifa Hospital are a, quote, crime. Does the White House stand by Israel's assessment that Hamas is headquartered underneath the hospital? And are you confident that Israel is following international law?
We've been quite clear about our view of Shifa. Shifa is the largest hospital in Gaza. It is the most advanced hospital in Gaza. There are severely ill patients there. There are also a number of civilians who have gathered there to seek refuge during the course of the conflict, and those lives need to be protected. But we've been equally clear that our intelligence, U.S. intelligence information, not just Israeli intelligence information, suggests that Hamas has used al-Shifa in an unconscionable way as a command and control facility for the planning of terrorist attacks and the execution of terrorist attacks, and continues to do so. That does not, in our view, mean that Israel should conduct airstrikes on the hospital or ground assaults on the hospital. We've been equally clear about that. But Hamas has put these...
Well, Israel has conducted ground assaults on the hospital. So your clarity means nothing.
People in severe jeopardy by the way in which it's conducting this war. So this is a microcosm of the real challenge associated with this entire conflict. And we've laid out our position. It's the same position I've just articulated.
So notice how he didn't answer her question, is Israel obeying the laws of war? He didn't answer that. And she's going to ask a follow-up now. And as for his claims about Shifa, we've already addressed them before. Israel's produced no evidence for its claims. And all the evidence that's come out so far includes phony evidence like that, which they were caught planting weapons, for example, at the scene, as we talked about in a previous segment. But here is now Kristen Welker following up and asking John Feiner to answer the question he didn't answer, which is Israel obeying the laws of war?
Are you confident Israel is following international law, John? Just yes or no there.
We are confident that it is our position that it needs to. When we have seen issues that are raised based on incidents on the ground, we raise them privately and directly with the government of Israel.
John, let me just, you're saying that Israel
play judge and jury on this question.
Yeah, let me just follow up quickly. You said Israel needs to follow international law. Are you confident they are following international law?
What I can say is it is not our position, certainly my position as a policymaker, to play real-time judge and jury on the question of any particular incident.
It is your job as a policymaker to play judge and jury, because U.S. law says you can't provide weapons to people who are committing war crimes. So he's pretending as if it's not his job because he knows the answer, which is that Israel is committing war crimes.
Well, that's leadership. There's American leadership right there. I'm not the judge. I'm not. Hey, who's in? I'm not in charge here.
Yeah,
it's like in an abusive relationship or something. Someone doesn't want to take responsibility. And they're like, but they are like clearly responsible. And it's kind of what the Israelis do as well, except they're just completely deferring to the Israelis, which is sort of the American way of war now. We'll defer to the Ukrainians on that. It's not our job. We're not arming them. We're not providing them with battlefield intelligence. The U.S. is operating a Reaper drone over the Gaza Strip right now. It has Delta forces inside Israel right now. And they're acting like they don't have any part in this. It's absurd. And Jake Sullivan, I mean, well, first of all, this whole thing is just an insult to everyone. It's an insult to everyone especially who supported Biden, that we should accept this policy and vote for Biden again when, like, this is the president that they're trying to run again. This is at the APEC, not APAC, but APEC summit with China's Xi. Here's Biden. I mean, the music, we don't even need the music. Forget the music. He just gets up in the middle and startles Xi in the middle of a meeting. Xi says, what is he doing here? Why is he getting up and ambling over to talk to me? It was completely inappropriate, and Xi has to bring his translator over because he's not ready for it. And then Biden has an op-ed out in the Washington Post trying to explain his Gaza policy to the public, which basically is just a bunch of boilerplate, and claiming that he cares about humanitarian aid and so on while he continues to fork over missiles to Israel. It's an insult to us that Biden didn't write that. He has no capacity to write that. It was written by Jake Sullivan's staff. It's obvious. And Jake Sullivan is a complete moron who 1 week before October 7th said that he deserves credit and the Biden administration deserves credit for all of the stability and peace and quiet they've brought to the Middle East. And they just need to move ahead, normalizing relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
I mean, that's a real window into the genius of Jake Sullivan. A month before he said that, the Middle East has never been quieter, which happened. He said that like 8 days before October 7th. So great job there, Jake Sullivan, for bragging about how quiet the Middle East is. And but anyway, what he meant by that really is that Palestinians have their head down. They're not fighting back. That's what he meant by quiet.
Yeah.
So a month before he said that, then he also said that that the Ukraine war is not a stalemate and that Ukraine is methodically taking territory. Well, how's that going? Recently, Zaluzhny, the head of the Ukrainian armed forces, said that this is a stalemate. And even there, he's being optimistic because actually Ukraine's losing territory. So even calling it a stalemate is being too generous to Ukraine. So Jake Sullivan, who's supposed to be in charge of national security, has shown himself to be so unbelievably incompetent, like embarrassingly incompetent, where he makes these declarations that are just so contradicted by the actual facts. And yet he's somehow treated seriously. And Biden at this summit repeated his claim that Xi Jinping is a dictator. And there's that footage of Antony Blinken like kind of sulking as he's saying that. He's realizing that Biden is again sort of trampling on all the work they've tried to do to pretend as if they want diplomacy with China, which of course they don't. But they certainly want it. They wanted to reestablish
military to military communications. That was one of the big goals. And then Biden goes and insults the Chinese president. He was clearly briefed not to do that.
Yeah.
By the way, how are things going in Ukraine? Here's a video that'll tell you something about the stalemate. This is the Ukrainian military right now. All right. Well, aside from the fact that they are not really enjoying themselves very much, this looks like a retirement home. I mean, these guys are older than me.
I'm sorry to laugh because this is so tragic.
It's just sad.
It's so, but
there's
the
no
comedy,
young men left.
Yeah, exactly. It's so sad. And this is how, look at the state of their morale. All right, Max, we have to watch that.
I just thought I'd give people something depressing to look at that wasn't in Gaza, that their tax dollars were paying for.
Fair enough. But yeah, look, morale is so low and it's so funny. And like, remember Antony Blinken a few months ago? He said, I'm paraphrasing, he said something like, the Russian army was said to be the second strongest army in the world. It turns out they're not even the strongest army in Ukraine, all this gloating it turned like all this gloating that the Biden people were doing about how well Ukraine was doing. And meanwhile, their counteroffensive was a complete bust. No one even talks about it anymore because they actually lost more territory than they gained, at least according to the last time I checked the figures. And there was recently that report in NBC News saying the Biden administration is now pressing Ukrainian officials on what they would accept in peace talks. And of course they're doing that because, as the article points out, the Biden administration is especially concerned about the fact that Ukraine is running out of forces. They don't have any people left. And that's the whole point of this whole thing. It was never about defending Ukraine. It was about sacrificing as many Ukrainians as possible to bleed Russia. And now they're running out of people to sacrifice. The average age of the Ukrainian military now is 43. I bet it's actually higher. I think it's actually probably too young for the average age. And so if you look at this article in NBC News about why Ukraine is being pressed for peace talks, this is what it says.
Where'd you go, Aaron? Aaron pushed the eject button, apparently.
My bad. I kicked myself out. So if you look at this article about the U.S. pushing Ukraine into peace talks, this is what it says. Biden administration officials are also worried that Ukraine is running out of forces while Russia has a seemingly endless supply, U.S. officials said. Ukraine is also struggling with recruiting and has recently seen public protests about some of President Zelensky's open-ended conscription requirements, which includes like dropping a series of eligibility requirements to get as many people in as possible. And here's more from the article. President Biden has been intensely focused on Ukraine's depleting military forces. Quote, manpower is at the top of the administration's concerns right now, unquote, one person said. The U.S. and its allies can provide Ukraine with weaponry, this person said, but, quote, but if they don't have competent forces to use, it doesn't do a lot of good. So that's what it comes down to. They're running out of cannon fodder. So that's why finally we're allowed to talk about peace talks with Russia, when what should have happened is we should have had peace talks with Russia before the invasion, which the U.S. rejected, and then after the Russian invasion, which the U.S. blocked.
Yeah, here's Euromaidan PR. This is like an official Ukrainian account, boasting about how the number of women in the Ukrainian army is increasing. Well, I wonder why, because there aren't any men. We're now seeing female casualties on the front line. There's video of a pregnant female soldier being captured by Russian soldiers. There are absurd ads in Ukrainian media recruiting women to the army. This is what happens when you've run out, and yet you're being pushed by your top patron to continue. Yeah, as Eric Thomas said, talking about Ukraine seems nostalgic now.
It's so true.
It's sort of like how, Putin ended COVID, and now Hamas ended the Ukraine proxy war.
Yeah.
Who's going to end this? What's going to end this?
Yeah.
Hopefully not another pandemic. Anyway, that's all I got for now.
All right. Well, thanks everybody who joined us today. This was great. Please remember to like this stream. I'm sure it will be demonetized for a million things that we said. So if you like it, that will help more people see it. And
yeah, thanks everyone. And thank you to Eric Thomas for helping us behind the scenes. Check out our new mini doc, Israel's War on Hospitals, on YouTube. We'll be back, or someone with us will be back this week, hopefully, with more updates on the situation. And remember, there are no quiet cars in Gaza. Peace.
That's right. Peace.